often. Even though our members, keep in mind, they work with the numbers. Numbers don't lie. I mean, when you're keeping accurate records, those records, they remain there. So often our members are in a situation where they're able to provide even some evidence as to what they're alleging. But even there, despite that, bad actors can try to cover up their tracks.
The Auditor General commented on the poor bookkeeping that made determining the exact price of the application impossible. Is this lack of standards something that your union is looking into?
It's not our role to look into the lack of standards. I would tell you, overall, generally speaking, the Financial Administration Act, when it's followed, it works very well. You know, and internal control is only as good if it's followed across the board. I don't want to make this pun, but we're talking about CBSA, right? If you're trying to secure the border and you put border officers across all the border, but once a month, it's a free-for-all, it defeats the whole purpose. It's the same thing financial controls. If you're willy-nilly and decide when you apply and when they're in, when they're out, it doesn't work. Internal controls need to be applied consistently to avoid blunders.
Okay. During the pandemic, almost all of the federal public service was working from home. How do you believe this has impacted the quality of the work completed?
For our members, I can tell you that working remotely is something that we're able to do, right? The majority of our members are working with numbers, spreadsheets, audits. This is something we can do remotely, and I think we've shown for the past 2 years, not only has it worked well, but I would argue it has increased productivity because you're able to really focus in and get the work done. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think there's value in being in the office every once in a while, but our members have shown the ability to be able to work remotely and get the work done. I would argue they've been more productive working from home than they are in the office.
Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est Madame Sécla Desgagnés. Vous avez la parole.
Madame Desgagnés, vous avez 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Mr. Danny Richard for being here today. You talked about the survey which you sent out to your members last week. I would really like you to tell us more about that, of course, without giving us any names, because anonymity is important. Of course, since I'm national president and I work for the border services myself, some of our members are there. I spoke to my team and I asked if some members had communicated with us to express their fears. No surprise, the answer was no, not because I think there were no fears, but simply because members are even afraid to communicate with us. So my team and I decided to carry out an anonymous survey to try to seek and collect information, knowing that we had to appear before this committee. And I can tell you, I was disappointed to see to what extent our members were not really enthusiastic to get involved. When anything concerns money, it's good to have a financial officer, not only at the end of the process, but at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. So amongst the 1,000 members we have in 3 departments, only 12 of them were involved. And that was concerning. It's concerning because it means that the importance of financial officers is not valued. We are not there to police anything. We are there to make sure that public funds are well used. So for that to be done, we should be allowed to do our work. So we collected information. 2 of my members called me afterwards, insisted that their names remain secret because they are afraid of any reprisals.
Est-ce que ces membres vous ont ramené?
Sorry? What did those members tell you? Unfortunately, I cannot share the nature of their interventions because it could identify them very well. Could you at least tell us, well, while protecting their identity, could you tell us whether they were talking about acts of professional misconduct within the CBSA? What I can share with you is that my members try to do their job, and they were told we don't have time for that. Once again, they put aside internal controls because there was no time. Very well. And these internal controls, was it while ArriveCan was underway during its development? So what I understand, while being far away, but I'll try to understand. During development of the application, some people in-house raised some red flags. Exactly. Very well. Interesting. Question. Another question. How many of your officers do you have at the Public Health Agency? Answer. By memory, about 50 or so. Question. How many of them are able to prepare a budget? Most of them. I don't know them all personally, but if one of my financial officers is not able to prepare a budget, I'll be very disappointed and I will have a talk with them. Perfect. From the Auditor General's report, we heard that the Public Health Agency was supposed to manage deployment and development of ArriveCan, but there was no budget, no follow-up. So I imagine from that the officers you represent were not necessarily involved, whereas when we have such a project, when there's a budget follow-up, you should involve the officers who are supposed to do that. Answer, yes. It's not even a matter of accounting. From my 16 years experience, I am wondering how that could have happened. You need a trace. You have internal controls. So if any of my members were consulted, we could have done things differently. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Internal controls have existed for decades. The problem is that we don't need to discover them. We just need to apply the internal controls. Perfect. So to continue with the Public Health Agency, if you have 50 or so officers there who are all able to prepare budgets, first of all, in your opinion, why were they not consulted to manage the application? Is this simply a process that is only connected to ArriveCan? Do you think that ArriveCan is the tip of the iceberg or an isolated case? Answer, I don't have any details, of course. From my experience with several departments, generally, internal controls work. When they are ignored, that's when you open the door to bad actors who could do things, who could divert funds. To answer, I think there's a tendency is not to consult our members. Instead of seeing them as an added value at the beginning of the process, they are seen or perceived as people that are difficult because they always come up with barriers. That's not the case. We just want to ask, you want to charge this amount of dollars. Does it make sense? The second one, is it an isolated case? It's still a matter of involving us throughout the process, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Thank you. Mr. Julian.
Please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Richard, for your testimony and for all the work that your members are doing every day to make sure that taxpayers have value for their money. This is an extremely important task. My first question, the matter you talked about in your opening remarks, you said, how does it make it difficult for your members to give advice and financial directives for government programs when contracts are outsourced outside the public service? This makes the task of our members more difficult to carry out their job when they don't have access to tools, to authorities, to the documents they need. For example, medical doctors. If you go to your doctor and you ask for a medical report, you want to know your situation, and then if you are hiding information from me If I don't have the right information, my diagnosis will not be appropriate. It's the same thing for our members. We have people who are financial professionals. Most of them are accountants. Most of them did auditing. They have the tools. But if they don't receive the information, if they are put aside saying that we can do this outside, we could try to find out how to do a budget, how to do a financial analysis. An external firm is going to do it. Why? We have the experience and expertise in-house within the public service. Our members are saying they find it strange. A consultant is recruited to work on a project, but I'm the one who prepares the report for the consultant. He does the job, and then he comes and asks me to check whether it's right or not. That's not how it works. And then the final report is done by our members. And then they're saying, this is all I asked at the beginning. So it's insulting. It's as if we don't have expertise in-house. The consultant recruited is outside, but to prepare his report, he needs us. So we need to trust our members. You need to give them opportunities. I'm not saying you should never use consultants. When there's lack of expertise in-house, of course, you need external consultants. But sometimes, by default, people go to consultants. Thank you for that answer.
I've been in Parliament for a long time, seen numerous scandals of this contracting out. Arrivecan, we're looking at $60 million. The Phoenix system started under the Harper government, is now at $2.5 billion and counting. The ETS scandal under the Harper government is $400 million. And I could go on, both the Harper government and the current government, numerous scandals. At any point, have you seen governments, like the former Conservative government, actually consulting with the expertise that is in your union, the financial accountants that understand the best way to go forward? Were you ever consulted, your members, ever consulted on Phoenix, ever consulted on ETS? You've mentioned that they were not really consulted on Arrivecan.
Very broad question. I will tell you, generally speaking, if we are consulted, which is not often, it's an afterthought. It's not at the beginning of the process to ensure that we're getting things right. Are we putting in place proper due diligence, proper accountability? We're trying to bring our members front and center to ensure we can avoid blunders like Phoenix, costing it out. Does this make sense? Recently, we had the public service healthcare plan. How much is that going to cost? We have financial professionals in-house that can help cost these things out, budget, forecast. This is what we do professionally, but we need the tools and the authority and the data to do our job.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned whistleblowers and the important role that they play. I remember vividly the case of Sylvie Terrien, who was a whistleblower under the Harper government, talking about misuse of EI funds, and the Harper government just canned her, basically summarily fired her. And there are many other examples of whistleblowers under the Conservatives, whistleblowers under the current government that have either been intimidated or have been fired. What are the protections we need to see so that we actually have a culture where whistleblowers can come forward with this information and not be raising the concerns of dismissal or being summarily fired, as we see in so many cases?
Yeah, OGO issued a report in 2017 on what needs to happen in order to improve whistleblower protections, particularly in the public service. There's a long list of recommendations, but the number one is to ensure that when a whistleblower speaks up, they are protected. And I'll give an example. If I were to work for any department, doesn't matter which one it is, and I feel uncomfortable because I feel I was sexually harassed, we will protect the victim. We will remove them from the work to ensure that they are protected at all costs. If you blow the whistle, you stay with the same team. We put the burden of proof on you. People that you have accused will try to cover it up. The burden of it's the amount of stress these people get put through because they're simply not protected. We need to ensure that whistleblowers are protected.
Thank you very much. Turning now to the start of our second round. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Richard, your evidence so far in the half an hour that we've listened to you, in my view, is a serious indictment against the Justin Trudeau government. And the concerns regarding the culture of fear is extremely disturbing for the professional public servants. That has expanded under Justin Trudeau by 40%. 2015, he promised to cut back on external